Hello and welcome back to the Summer Day Studios YouTube channel. First of all, Happy New Year. We're starting off with a new tutorial for Maya. We're looking at how to create a cobblestone material entirely procedurally. So we won't be using any image files or UVs. So this is going to be great if you want to quickly texture something. You can slap it on anything. It'll just work because it isn't reliant on anything that you actually do to your model. It's all entirely procedural and it will just continue infinitely, randomly as well, and it shouldn't look too repetitive either by the time we have this all set up. And we're just going to be using nodes built into Maya and Arnold. They can be a little complicated to set up, so that's why I'm making a tutorial on it today, and this is probably the most complicated material I've shown you guys how to make so far. So I'm just starting out with a cube. You can use any shape that you like, but I would say make sure that it has some relatively even quad topology like this, because it's going to be important later. So what are we looking at here? So cobblestone has two main components. It has the actual stones that make up the majority of the surface and the space or gaps between each stone, which might be filled with like sand, dirt, moss, or whatever, depending on how old it is or where it is. There's also weathering, like I mentioned, and as in the gradual wear and tear of the materials over time, and things like moss that might creep in over time in more wet climates, especially in those creases between the stones, and flat surfaces and recesses and things like that at the base of buildings as well. So we're going to look at how to create all of that just using the nodes available to you in Maya and Arnold's Hypershade editor. Before we continue, I would say absolutely use reference for this, even when creating materials, just like you would with modeling. It's important, especially if you're going for a realistic, but even for a stylized look as well. It's important that you make it actually look like the thing you want it to be. So this is the reference image I'm using. Well, I have a few different types here, but just to give you an idea of the kind of thing we're trying to create. Stones of various different sizes. I'm going to go for a mossy look today, so we're going to replicate that in the middle, but feel free to make yours look a little bit differently. You don't have to use the exact same settings as me, but just to give you a ballpark idea of how to get there, and you can go ahead and tweak it yourself afterwards. But yeah, highly encourage that you use reference, collect a few images just to see what you're doing, even if it's just one image to base your material off of. So to begin with, put a light in your scene as well. I'm just using a sky dome light. Feel free to use any light though, just as long as you can actually see what you're doing. I'm going to right click on my model, assign new material, come to Arnold, and we're going to use an open PBR surface. Okay, and I'm just going to rename this to Cobblestone Material, just so we know what that is and it keeps things tidy. You might notice that your cube has turned a kind of lighter gray, whitish color. That's because texturing in the window is on. If you don't want that on, just click this button up here and we can go back to normal. It doesn't really matter though too much with this. So to get started, we're going to open up the Hypershade editor, this little blue ball up here. And right now it's going to look blank, but in order to see our new material we just created, you have a list of materials up here, and we can see cobblestone material that we just created. So we're going to go ahead and click that. That will highlight yellow, and then click this button here, and that's going to bring that within the viewport here. So we can see our material. It has a million different inputs, but don't worry about that. We're not going to be using all of them, and I'll go through each one that we do have to use. So to begin with, how do we actually start by creating the base of this, the cobblestones and the creases? Well, there is a material we can use under 3D textures. Now, a 3D texture is essentially a material that uses kind of like triplanar projection, if you've used that before. It kind of projects the material within 3D space onto our object without actually requiring any materials or any UVs, sorry, as opposed to 2D textures which will need UVs in order to work. These do not. You can just use them without. And to create the effect that we need, we are going to use a granite material, which kind of just looks like some sort of Minecraft texture at the moment, right? Looking at this, but we can tweak this to make this work for us. So to begin with, I'm just going to plug the color into the base color. It won't stay there, but this is just so that we can see what our material looks like. Essentially, we're going to be using this as a mask that is black and white, to tell Maya where we want the cobblestones and the creases to be, and that will make sense as we go through. So once you have these connected in this way, come back to your viewport, go to render, and then just click on Arnold. This way we'll be able to see it actually in our scene. You can see right now this kind of just looks nothing like cobblestone, but don't worry, we're going to change a bunch of settings and eventually we'll have what we need. So there's a whole bunch of different settings in here, like with our open PBR surface. we're going to change colors 1, 2, and 3. Right now they're black, green, and blue. We're going to just set those to black. Okay, we don't need those to be any other color. The filler color is going to be white. So what you might have noticed already is that colors 1, 2, and 3 define these little dots, and the filler color defines the rest of it, right? Kind of like the creases between the stones. So we just need to tweak these settings until we have something that looks a little bit more cobblestone-y. So how can we go ahead and do that? Well, what we'll do is I've gone through and checked a bunch of settings beforehand before doing this video to kind of see what the best values are. And that'll be a good starting point for you. But then after that, feel free to change this to whatever you want this to be. I found for the cell size, I'm going to have this around 3.3. Okay, and right now this looks like a complete out of a mess. Don't worry, it will start to look better. The density I'm going to have around 0.96. Okay, the mix ratio I'm going to set to 1. The spottiness, for the time being, I'm just going to have that set to 0. Randomness I want quite low, and you can see that's made it a lot more uniform. If I adjust this, you know, it makes everything a lot more swirly, but if I put this down to absolute 0, then it's kind of like a perfect grid, which is closer to what we want, but not quite. So I'm going to set this to something like 0.268 or something like that, or 0.27 if you want to. Just to give it a bit of randomness, but not too much. Threshold I set to almost max, but not 100%, because you can see if I put that to 1, we're getting mostly just a black cube. But if I put this down to something like 0.92, you can see now we're getting what is starting to look like a kind of cobblestone-y shape. We've got these mismatched shaped stones with the creases in between. Okay, the creases here you can turn on and off. If I was to tick this box off, you can see they just become like white blobs. But if we leave this on, we've got those nice gaps. Okay. So we're not actually going to be using this granite material here to make the color of our material. We're essentially just going to use it as a guide, like I mentioned, to tell Arnold where to put other things. So let's come back to the Hypershade editor, and we're just going to unplug this for now, okay? And that will reset your base color back to normal. What we're going to do is, first of all, create a displacement, right? Because we need to actually have the cobblestone sticking out of the model. You don't have to use displacement. You could use bump if you want to, but I want this to be quite a nice looking material with displacement so it looks more realistic. So create a displacement shader, delete the little blue node that comes connected to it, and just plug that directly into the displacement shader of the PBR surface in the Hypershade editor. We're then going to take our granite material, click on the out color here just to bring down the out color red, green, and blue, and just take the out color red. It won't take just the color on its own, so we need to just use one of the color channels, or you can use the alpha as well. It's basically the same thing. We're just looking for a single color output from this for this to work. Okay, now if you come back to your viewport, you'll probably notice that your model has kind of exploded and it looks nothing like cobblestone, but don't worry, that is okay. We're going to change a few things. So first of all, open your displacement node, turn off auto bump. Okay, we don't want that for the time being. And then set the scalar 0 value to 0.5. Okay, it still looks like a horrendous mess, but don't worry, we're going to be fixing this. Then change the scale from 1, okay, to minus 0.01. And again, you might just have a bit of a lumpy cube now. And the reason for that is, even though displacement does add height to your model that you don't have to make yourself at render time, it does still need enough polygon density, enough mesh density in order for it to work. That's why I said to give your model some kind of nice even topology like this with cubes, because we're going to have to subdivide this. But we're not going to subdivide this in the viewport, okay? We could just go ahead and smooth, but then it's going to get a lot heavier in our scene. We don't really want that. So a better thing to do is, with your cube selected, come to the P-cube shape 1, or if you've renamed the cube, that would be whatever, but you're just looking for the shape node. And then under Arnold here, come to subdivision, type, set that to Cat Clark, and set the iterations to something like 5. This will depend on the density of your mesh, but if yours is similar to mine, 5 should work well enough for this. If we go ahead and render now, you'll see we're now getting some nice displacement in our model. We're getting the exact same material that we just used, that granite that we've adjusted, and it's displacing our mesh rather than adding color, right? So we're pretty close already to having our cobblestone shapes in place, but right now obviously it's just white. We need to add a bunch of color and various different things in order to make this look more realistic. So let's come back to our Hypershade editor again. Okay, and let's go ahead and actually add some color to this. So what I'm going to do is create a mix shader first. This will allow us to mix two different materials together. You can delete this little blue node because we don't need it. And the reason why we're using a mix shader is because, like we mentioned, we have the creases and the stones. And if the creases have moss or dirt in them, they obviously need to be a different color. And we couldn't just use that with one texture file, right? Because it wouldn't know where to put each color. So we're going to plug the out color into the base color. And for the time being, this won't do anything because this is just a node that allows us to combine materials. It doesn't actually have any color by default. We're then going to create a couple of volume noise textures, okay? We could just use something like a flat, which is essentially just a flat color, but we want to have a bit more visual interest here. So we're going to use a noise and change the color of that to give us that kind of grainy look that you have in the reference, right? You can see these stones aren't perfectly all one color. If you're going for a stylized look, that might be okay, but I don't want that. I want it to be slightly more realistic. So I'm going to take the out color of this and just plug that into shader 1. Okay, if we come back to our viewport, you'll see that probably not much has happened. We'll go ahead and duplicate this with that selected, come up to edit, go to duplicate, and then click on shading network. And then we'll plug the out color of this into shader 2. Again, you'll probably notice not much has happened. And then we'll take out color red again from this, not the out color. And what we're going to do is use this to drive the mix of our mix shader, okay? So the granite here is essentially just driving, 1, the displacement, and 2, it's telling Maya where we want certain things to go, right? So if we assume this will be the green color, this will be the gray stone color, it's basically saying that everywhere there is black from our granite texture we had earlier, that's going to be the stone color. Everywhere is white, that's going to be the green color. And you still won't notice much of a difference here, and that's because we need to actually change the color of these materials. So let's come to color balance and change the color gain to green. Okay, and then we'll change the color balance of this one to more of a gray, something like this. If your render doesn't update straight away, you might have to just come to renderer and then viewport and then click on Arnold again. Sometimes it doesn't always update when you're doing things on the fly like this. So you can see now we have our green color as the creases and we have the gray color for the stone, but it's looking a bit all over the place right now. We can kind of probably do better here. It looks a bit silly. So we need to actually go ahead and adjust the colors that we have here. So we'll select our volume noise for the stone and we'll make a few changes. It's got that spotty effect that I wanted, but it's a little bit all over the place, a bit too simple for my liking. So I'm going to change a few things. I'm probably going to adjust the color a little bit. So the color gain right now is kind of like a dark gray. We could make that darker if we wanted to. The color offset is going to be those black parts there. So I'm going to make those a bit lighter because I don't want it to be too stark of a contrast. Okay. And there's a few settings here we can change to actually adjust this pattern. So I like to have the randomness at 1, otherwise you're going to get this kind of grid pattern like this, right? Which is not what we want. Size randomness as well, I also like to set that to 1, so now you can see we're getting a bit more of a spotty look. And spottiness you can also increase to 1 if you like. And then I might turn the density down a bit, just so that's looking a little bit more spaced out, not quite as extreme. Okay, and then feel free to then just tweak the colors a little bit to your liking. It's entirely up to you how this is going to look. Maybe something like this for the time being. Okay, so once we're happy with that, we can then go ahead and adjust the noise that we're using for the moss. So again, this is way too green. I just set it to a really bright color to begin with so we can see what we're doing. But moss, I kind of want it to be more of a darker yellowish green, something like this, maybe a bit darker. Okay, and then the color offset, we can maybe make that a different type of green as well, maybe a much darker green like this, something like that. Okay, so that's already starting to look better, but you can see we still have a bit of a ways to go. We could leave it here. This would look kind of stylized, but it's a bit too plain. We can add some more breakup to this to make this look better and more realistic. So let's come back to our Hypershade editor. And then now let's add some bumpiness to this, right? We're going to use the normal instead. So we're using the displacement just to create the stones. And generally that's what you want to do. You want to use displacement to do large scale changes, right? Like the actual texture of the cobblestone. And you want to use bump or normal to create more fine scale detail that you wouldn't necessarily need in the model, just because it's too small for you to really notice unless you're really up close. So we're going to create a bump 2D node. Okay, and then we're going to plug the out normal into the normal camera. And just to begin with, that's not going to do anything because we actually need to plug some materials into this. Again, we're going to use another mix shader, and the reason for that is because we don't want the same normal map or the same bumpiness to be used on each, right? Because you remember, these are separate colors, but they're also separate materials. In the crease is a moss, and then this is a stone, so they probably have a different texture. So we're going to plug the out color from here, or the out color red, sorry, if you click on this little plus. And then we're going to take the out color red from the granite, and again we're going to use that as the mix to tell Maya where we want the bump for the creases and the stone. And again, still nothing because we haven't given Maya anything to actually use as the bumpiness. For that, we're going to create a couple new materials. We're going to go ahead and create another volume noise from the free textures section over here. Okay, and I'm going to take the out color red, or just the out color in this case, sorry, and then plug that into shader 1. Again, if you don't see that update straight away, don't worry, just come up to renderer and then go from Arnold to viewport 2.0 and back again, and then that will just kind of jog up Arnold's memory and we'll know to update. So that's adding some bumpiness. Okay, and you can see right now it's kind of adding it to everywhere because we need to put another material in to the mix shader. And this is also a bit too much, so let's go ahead and adjust this. So I'm going to change the size randomness to 1 again. Okay, and maybe the spottiness up to 1 as well, and I might turn the density down a little bit. Just to add a bit of lumpiness to this, right? You can see now it's got some kind of nodules on it, but it's nothing too crazy. You can increase the density as well if you like. It's really up to you. I like it kind of like this. So right now it looks like the bumps are sort of coming out like grains of sand on the stone, and that's okay, but I think I'd like this to be inverted, right? So it looks like these are actually holes in the stone rather than bumps coming out, because I think that looks a bit more natural, and right now it looks a bit odd. So what we can do is come back to the Hypershade editor. We're going to create an AI color correct node, and you can do all sorts of things with this, like the name suggests. You can change colors, but what we can do with this is if we plug the out color of our volume noise we were using for the bump, then plug the out color red, or just the out color into shader 1, sorry. And then in the color correct, I'm going to tick invert. And you can see now what that's done is it's reversed the direction of the blacks and whites of this volume noise, which now makes it look like it's going into the stone rather than out. You don't have to do it this way. It's just my personal preference. I feel like it looks a bit more accurate. And then we can go ahead and maybe tweak this volume noise a little bit more, just to make that look a little bit more realistic, maybe. You can adjust the frequency if you like to make this more detailed. That will then increase the render times a decent bit. Increase the ratio if you want this to be more like concentrated. And yeah, just play around with these settings until you have something that feels a little bit more accurate, or to whatever reference you're using, or just to whatever you like as well. You can also turn the amplitude down. By default, that's at 1 if you want this to be a much lighter look to it. I might turn this down to something like 0.00, maybe 3 or 2. And I might increase the density a little bit. Just so we've got some texture there, but it's not too extreme, right? The stones are still relatively smooth. But yeah, go ahead and adjust that to your liking. And then we can now do the same thing for the mossy material in the cracks. So for this, I'm going to use a different material because I don't want this to look the same. I'm going to use something called a Brownian. Again, that's in the 3D textures section. And this, we don't need a color correct node for. This I feel like just has a bit more of a close look to the kind of moss you might get in the cracks. So I'm going to take the out color of this and just plug that into shader 2. And then if we come back It probably hasn't updated straight away, so you might need to go to Render, Viewport 2.0, and swap it back to Arnold again. So we're getting some bumpiness now between the cracks as well. To change this material, it's got a few different settings compared to the noise that we were previously using. So for this, you could increase the octaves, which kind of just makes it a little bit more detailed. If I increase that even by a little bit now, you can see we're getting a much different bump material to the one that we're using for the stone. And this is still looking pretty stylized, but it's getting a bit closer to sort of a nice cobblestone look. You could use this as is, but there's still some more we can do to this to break up the model on top of the bump that we've already gone ahead and added. So if we go back to the Hypershade editor, and you might at this point start to notice that the viewport's getting a bit messy with all the different nodes. To clean this up, go ahead and click on this little blue node here right at the end, and then just press this button to focus everything. And it will just tidy things up a little bit for you and make that a bit cleaner to look at. So if we come to our granite shader, or granite material node here, this little icon here with the 3 bars, if you just click that 3 times, it's then going to open up all the inputs that we have for the granite node. These essentially just correspond to all the different settings we have here. What this will allow us to do is actually use a node as an input to drive some of these, which will allow us to have even more creativity and like visual interest and realism for this. So to begin with, I want to plug something into the creases to make those a little bit more detailed, because right now they're very, very plain looking, and I think this could look a lot better. And bear in mind, anything we plug into here, because it's being used to drive the mix between the color, the bump, and the displacement, it's going to have a visual effect on that, and it's going to be quite strong because of how much this is driving the actual look of the material. But that's okay, that's what we want, but just bear that in mind. So from the 3D texture section, I'm going to create a solid fractal, okay, and I'm going to take the out color red, and we're going to plug that straight into the creases. Now, if I come back, you can see now that has made our creases look a little bit different. In some places, they've been, the stone is actually crossing over a little bit. But we can make this more apparent just by adjusting the settings here within the fractal. You might notice when you adjust settings, sometimes Maya is going to have a hard time re-rendering, and it's going to stutter like this. It's a bug that's existed in Maya for a really long time. It's very annoying, but all you need to do is just adjust the come back to render, change to viewport 2.0, and then Arnold again to bring that back. Okay, and now we can adjust various different things here, like the frequency ratio, the amplitude, the threshold, in order to make this look different, because this is going to drive the creases now, the color, this black and white color. We could potentially increase the frequency ratio or decrease it even. And again, every time you change something there, you'll just have to refresh the render annoyingly. Just an annoying old bug with Maya and Arnold. We can then go ahead and also plug a solid fractal into the filler color, which is the color that actually defines where our creases are. So we'll take the out color, just complete out color, and plug that into the filler color. Okay. So you can go ahead and adjust a whole bunch of settings within here as well, and you can see that's going to add a bit more visual interest in the creases. It's going to make it a little bit less uniform. And then one last thing we can do is we can come back to the Hypershade editor, create a marble material. This is quite good for adding kind of cracks like this, sort of a marbly-like material, hence the name. And then we can go ahead and take the out color red from this and plug that into the spottiness. Okay, now if we just refresh the render, you can see that really makes quite a big difference, and it's made it look a lot more old. It's made it look like some of the cobblestones are kind of a bit destroyed. And depending on the vein width here, that will sort of adjust how much of an effect that has. You might have to refresh the render a few times. I like to have a vein width that's maybe a little bit higher, just so we still have most of those cobblestones. But you can see now that's added a lot more breakup, and this looks a lot more interesting than it did, just because the creases aren't as uniform, the stones aren't as uniform, and we've got a lot more texture going on than we did before. So essentially, that's how you create a very, very quick cobblestone material. We had this set up now, we've been recording for about 25 minutes. It's not too many nodes. You could go ahead and add more nodes to tweak this even further, play around with the different textures in here and plug them into the different elements to see what they do. You can't really go too far wrong. to adjust this, you really can just kind of adjust the granite texture now. If I were to adjust the density, you can see we've got a lot less cobbles, and annoyingly you will have to refresh the render when you do this now. You can adjust the randomness to have it be way more random like this, which kind of looks like a more sort of old garden path. Or you can have it perfectly straight if you wanted to as well, but you're still going to have some randomness because of the nodes that we've put in everywhere else. So now that you've got all that plugged in, just kind of adjusting the granite texture, you can now adjust the actual wear and size of the cobblestones depending on what kind of style you're going for. So yeah, that is how you create a very, very quick cobblestone material entirely procedurally in Maya. You can definitely take it a lot further than this, but just for getting something quickly set up, you know, if I was to go and create a cylinder, maybe let's scale this up. Add a few edge loops here so that we can actually use the displacement on this guy. And if I just go ahead and then add the subdivision again up to 5 and then apply the same material that we created, you can see we can just apply it to anything and it will just work regardless of the UVs or shapes, right? So it's a very, very good universal material to create. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any comments at all, please post those in the comment section. Always happy to answer anything. I know this can get quite complicated and daunting for some people. So yeah, any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. If you have any suggestions as well, we always love to hear those. Those are really, really helpful. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.